These questions strike at the heart of a mystery that has puzzled humanity for centuries. But to answer them, we must first understand not just who God is, but what he is. God is not merely a ruler enforcing order, he is the foundation of all morality, the embodiment of absolute justice. Unlike earthly kings who crush their enemies out of fear, God does not act in haste, nor does he erase beings out of convenience. To do so would contradict his very nature. When God created the angels, he granted them something profound, the ability to choose. This was not an oversight, nor a mistake. It was a necessity. Without choice, there is no love, no loyalty, no goodness. It is this very gift that allows us to choose righteousness, but it also allows some to reject it. Satan and his followers did not fall because they were forced to, but because they chose rebellion. Had God merely erased them, what would that say about freedom? If the answer to disobedience was instant destruction, then love would be meaningless, and loyalty would be born out of fear rather than virtue. Many believe that divine justice means immediate punishment, but God does not act as a tyrant seeking vengeance. He does not destroy, but he allows consequences to unfold. Consider a teacher who sees a student making a grave mistake. If the teacher simply removes the student rather than allowing them to experience the result of their actions, does the student truly learn? No. Similarly, if God had annihilated the fallen angels, the question of rebellion would remain unanswered in the minds of all creation. Evil must be seen for what it truly is. It must be allowed to run its course, not because God is powerless, but because true justice demands revelation before judgment. A question often arises: why should evil continue to exist at all? Why does God not bring an immediate end to the suffering caused by Satan and his legions? The answer lies in the grand design of existence itself. Darkness serves as a contrast to light. It is in knowing pain that we appreciate healing. It is in seeing destruction that we recognize the beauty of creation. While this does not justify evil, it reveals why it is permitted for a time. God's plan is not about quick solutions, but ultimate resolutions. The existence of Satan is not a challenge to God's power, but a necessary stage in the unfolding of divine justice. Some may argue, then will God allow evil to exist forever? No, he will not. But he will not act on human timelines. Judgment will come, but not as a hasty erasure of existence. Rather, it will be the culmination of every choice made, of every truth revealed, of every deception unmasked. Satan and his followers are not destroyed yet because their judgment is not merely an event, it is a lesson. A lesson for every soul, every being in existence, to see why rebellion against God leads not to freedom, but to ruin. The concept of free will is fundamental to understanding why God does not simply destroy Satan or the fallen angel. Free will is not just a privilege. It is an essential part of existence itself. Without it, love, righteousness, and even the notion of good and evil would cease to have meaning. God, in his infinite wisdom, created all beings, including angels, with the ability to choose. This was not an accident or a mistake. If he had created beings who could only obey, then their obedience would be empty. Love that is forced is not love at all. Worship that is compulsory is no different from slavery. God does not desire mechanical submission, but genuine devotion that comes from choice. When the angels were created, they were given perfect wisdom and power, yet they were still granted the ability to choose their own path. Some, like Michael and Gabriel, chose to remain loyal to God. Others, led by Lucifer, chose rebellion. The crucial point here is that they were not deceived or forced into their decision. They acted out of their own free will. Their choice had real consequences, and those consequences had to be faced rather than erased. If God were to simply eliminate Satan and his followers, he would be interfering with the very system he established. Free will would no longer be free if God stepped in and destroyed those who misused it. The moment he overrides a choice, even an evil one, he negates the entire principle of moral agency. A world where only correct choices are allowed is a world without true virtue. Justice also demands that choices have lasting consequences. If someone commits a crime and is immediately erased from existence, have they truly faced justice? Or has their accountability simply been removed? In human societies, punishment is not about instant destruction, but about showing that actions have meaning and repercussions. If this is true for human justice, how much more true is it for divine justice? Free will is not just about individuals, it has a cosmic purpose. The rebellion of Satan and the fallen angels was not a private matter, but a universal event. All of creation bore witness to it. Had God responded by annihilating the rebels, the rest of creation might have obeyed out of fear rather than understanding. The question of whether God's rule was just would still linger. The existence of evil, then, is allowed not because God is indifferent, but because true justice requires that rebellion be revealed for what it is. By allowing Satan and the fallen angels to exist, God demonstrates that evil leads to chaos, destruction, and suffering not because he wills it, but because that is the natural consequence of rejecting him. Consider an example. A father warns his son not to touch fire. The son, driven by curiosity and defiance, ignores the warning and gets burned. The father, being wise, does not immediately stop him, but allows the experience to teach the lesson. If the father had forcibly prevented the son from ever encountering fire, the lesson would remain incomplete. The son would obey, but not because he understood, only because he was prevented from choosing otherwise. Likewise, God allows fallen beings to continue, because their existence serves as a testament to the reality of evil. If Satan had been destroyed immediately, his followers could argue that he never had the chance to prove his claims. By permitting evil to exist for a time, God allows creation to see its true nature and consequences. Furthermore, free will does not mean freedom from accountability. Satan and the fallen angels are not beyond justice. They are not granted endless existence without consequence. Their fate is sealed, but the judgment is not an arbitrary act of power. It is the result of their own choices. Just as a criminal is not instantly erased, but faces a trial, so too do the fallen angels remain until the full weight of their rebellion is understood by. This is the essence of free will. That choice carries meaning, that good is chosen freely, and that even the existence of evil serves a purpose in the grand design of justice. God is not simply a being of great power. He is the very definition of moral perfection. His actions are not dictated by impulse or necessity, but by his own nature, which is unchanging, just, and wholly good. Unlike human rulers, who may compromise on principles for the sake of convenience, God cannot act in a manner that contradicts his own essence. If he were to act unjustly, he would cease to be God. Justice is not merely about punishment, it is about alignment with truth. If God were to destroy Satan and the fallen angels merely because they opposed him, he would be acting from power alone rather than justice. Power may enforce obedience, but it does not create righteousness. Justice requires that every action be weighed according to its moral significance, not merely its consequences. If Satan and his angels were erased the moment they rebelled, their wrongdoing would never be fully exposed, nor would the justice of God's rule be made evident to all creation. Moral perfection does not allow for arbitrary destruction. A perfect being does not act on impulse, but in accordance with absolute righteousness. If the destruction of the fallen was the best and most just course of action, it would have already been done. The very fact that they continue to exist suggests that their presence serves a greater purpose in God's moral order. The existence of evil is not a reflection of God's failure, but of his patience and wisdom. He allows all things to unfold in their proper time, ensuring that justice is not only done, but understood. Annihilation is not a function of divine justice. If God destroyed Satan instantly, it would not be justice but avoidance. The existence of moral law means that transgressors must be held accountable in a way that reveals the full weight of their actions. Consider a judge who, instead of sentencing a criminal according to the law, simply erases their existence. This would not be justice. It would be a negation of it. The moral weight of their crime would never be recognized, and others would not learn the true cost of wrongdoing. The perfection of God's justice means that every decision he makes is the best possible decision. He does not destroy without cause, nor does he delay judgment needlessly. The existence of Satan and the fallen angels is not due to any limitation in God's power, but to the necessity of moral revelation. The consequences of rebellion must be fully realized so that no doubt remains in the minds of creation regarding the goodness of God's rule. Righteousness cannot be established through force alone. If God simply removed all opposition, there would be no opportunity for moral understanding. It is one thing to obey because there is no other option. It is another to obey because one has seen the true nature of good and evil and has chosen rightly. Moral clarity is achieved not through the absence of evil, but through the revelation of its consequences. Destruction is easy. Justice is precise. If God's response to rebellion was instant annihilation, then the distinction between good and evil would be blurred. Beings would follow him not because he is just, but because they fear the consequences of rebellion. True morality is not based on fear, but on understanding. The fallen angels are not destroyed because their continued existence serves to illuminate the full weight of their decision and the inevitable result of opposing divine order. A morally perfect being cannot act out of convenience. If the most righteous course of action were simply to erase evil, then evil would have never been allowed to exist in the first place. The fact that it does exist suggests that it has a role to play in the revelation of divine justice. God's moral perfection ensures that every action he takes is in harmony with the highest good, even if that means allowing evil to persist for a time. Moral perfection also requires consistency. If God's justice was based purely on power, then there would be no reason to trust him. The very fact that he does not act impulsively proves that his justice is deliberate and unwavering. If God were to destroy his enemies simply because they opposed him, then righteousness would be indistinguishable from tyranny. Justice must be demonstrable, and that means allowing evil to reveal itself fully before judgment is executed. God's moral perfection ensures that even the fate of the fallen is handled with absolute justice. He does not destroy for the sake of power, nor does he allow evil to continue without purpose. The fallen are not immediately wiped out because their rebellion must be seen for what it truly is, a rejection of goodness that leads to inevitable ruin. This is not a failure of divine authority, but a testimony to divine wisdom, ensuring that all creation understands why righteousness is the only true path. Everything that exists has a purpose, whether it is seen or unseen, understood or misunderstood. The existence of Satan and the fallen angels is no exception. If God, who is all-knowing and all-powerful, allows something to exist, it is because that existence serves a role within the grand order of creation. Nothing continues without reason, and nothing is permitted arbitrarily. The presence of evil is not an accident, but a part of the larger moral and spiritual framework through which creation comes to understand the nature of goodness, truth, and justice. The contrast between good and evil allows for deeper comprehension. Without darkness, light would not be fully appreciated. Without suffering, the value of peace and joy would not be understood. This does not mean that evil is necessary in the sense that it was required to exist, but once it came into being through the misuse of free will, it now serves a function within the divine plan. Satan and his followers rejected goodness, but in doing so, they became a living demonstration of what separation from God truly means. Their continued existence reveals the ultimate consequences of rebellion, ensuring that all creation sees and understands why the way of God is the only path to true life. Evil is allowed for a time, not as an endorsement, but as a revelation. If Satan had been immediately destroyed, the questions surrounding his rebellion would remain unanswered. Were his accusations against God valid? Was there truly another way apart from divine rule? Would his alternative lead to something better? These questions could only be answered by allowing his choices to play out to their natural end. The purpose of existence, then, is not merely to be, but to reveal, to make manifest the truth through experience and consequence. Moral understanding develops through observation and experience. If creation had only known goodness, without ever witnessing the reality of evil, obedience to God might seem arbitrary rather than necessary. The fallen angels serve as an example, not in the sense that their actions should be followed, but in the sense that their downfall serves as a warning. Their existence is a constant reminder that separation from God does not lead to freedom, but to corruption, destruction, and suffering. Judgment is not about erasing existence, but about fulfilling purpose. The fallen beings are not immediately removed because their continued presence serves to highlight the reality of divine justice. If every act of rebellion were met with instant annihilation, then submission would be based on fear rather than understanding. Instead, by allowing evil to persist for a time, God ensures that all creation sees for itself why righteousness is the only true foundation for existence. Satan and his angels do not exist outside of divine control. Though they rebelled, they are still subject to divine law. Their actions, though evil, are permitted within the boundaries set by God. They cannot go beyond what is allowed, and their presence does not indicate divine weakness, but divine patience. God does not need to eliminate them immediately because their existence will, in the end, serve his purpose. Even in their rebellion, they become tools for the revelation of truth, demonstrating what life apart from God truly looks like. The fallen beings are not an eternal fixture, but a temporary element within a greater story. Their purpose is not to last forever, but to serve as an example. Their rebellion provides a lasting testimony to the consequences of rejecting divine authority. The universe watches and learns, seeing firsthand that the alternative to God's rule is not independence and fulfillment, but decay and ruin. The existence of opposition sharpens the understanding of truth. A person who has only known comfort may not appreciate it fully until they experience hardship. A person who has only seen light may not understand its brilliance until they witness darkness. In the same way, The continued presence of the fallen beings allows creation to see, beyond theory, the reality of what rebellion brings. It is not enough to be told that disobedience leads to destruction, one must see it unfold. If existence were only about avoiding conflict, then evil would have been eliminated immediately. But existence is about understanding, choice, and consequence. God does not create beings to exist without purpose, and he does not allow rebellion without reason. The fallen serve a role not because they were meant to be evil, but because their choices now serve as a contrast to truth. Their existence is a lesson, one that will echo through eternity, ensuring that righteousness is never again questioned. Justice is not simply the act of punishing wrongdoing. It is the process of revealing truth, enforcing moral order, and ensuring that every choice has its rightful consequence. If divine justice were merely about eliminating evil, then God could have destroyed Satan and the fallen angels in an instant. But justice is not about erasure, it is about fulfillment. Every action, whether good or evil, must lead to its natural end, allowing creation to witness the full weight of moral reality. God's justice is not impulsive but precise. He does not act in haste, nor does he punish arbitrarily. The fallen angels are not destroyed because their rebellion is still unfolding in history. They have chosen a path, and divine justice allows them to walk it to its inevitable end. If judgment were immediate, it would not be true justice but avoidance. The consequences of their actions must be fully revealed, so that no question remains as to the nature of their rebellion and its effects on creation. The fallen beings are not free from justice, they are awaiting it. Their continued existence is not an escape from punishment, but a temporary allowance. Just as criminals are not instantly removed from existence, but are tried and sentenced according to the law, so too are Satan and his angels, awaiting their final judgment. Their fate is sealed, but the execution of that judgment must serve a purpose beyond their destruction. It must serve as a testimony to divine justice itself. Justice requires demonstration, not just enforcement. If God had destroyed Satan immediately, the rest of creation might have feared his power, but not necessarily understood his justice. The punishment of rebellion must be witnessed, not hidden. If judgment were instant, it would appear as mere dominance rather than the outworking of a moral order. By allowing the fallen to exist for a time, God ensures that all creation understands why their judgment is necessary. Justice is not just about the guilty, it is about the innocent as well. The judgment of the fallen is not simply for their sake, but for the sake of all who observe it. If evil were removed without process, then creation would never fully grasp why it was evil in the first place. The existence of fallen beings serves as a contrast, showing in real time what happens when one departs from God's will. The suffering, deception, and destruction they bring are not outside God's control, but are allowed so that their rebellion is fully revealed for what it is. The full exposure of evil is necessary for justice to be complete. If Satan had been erased the moment he rebelled, others might question whether his accusations had merit. Did he have a valid point? Was God truly just? Was there another way apart from divine authority? These questions could only be answered by allowing his rebellion to unfold and its consequences to be witnessed. Justice does not merely remove opposition, it exposes falsehood, allowing truth to stand unchallenged. The delay of judgment is not a weakness, it is wisdom. If God were to act against evil before its effects were fully realized, the lesson of justice would remain incomplete. Every moral decision must reach its logical conclusion, showing the full reality of its outcome. The rebellion of the fallen is a cosmic lesson, not just for them, but for all creation. The suffering caused by evil is not meaningless. It is the evidence that rebellion against divine order leads to destruction. Divine justice extends beyond time. Humans measure justice by immediate action, but God sees beyond the present moment. The fallen beings may continue to act, but they do so within limits set by divine law. They are not free to do as they please indefinitely. Their time is measured, and their end is certain. Their continued existence is not proof of their escape from justice, but of the patience and precision of divine judgment. True justice cannot be rushed. A judge who sentences without a trial is not just but unjust. The fallen are not removed instantly because their trial is not for their sake alone. It is for the sake of all who must understand the true weight of their rebellion. The purpose of justice is not merely to destroy the guilty, but to establish righteousness. By allowing their rebellion to unfold, God ensures that when judgment comes, it will be recognized as fully deserved. The fallen beings are living evidence of what happens when one turns away from God. Their destruction, when it comes, will not be a mere act of divine power, but a fulfillment of justice. The reason they are not yet destroyed is not because justice is delayed, but because it is being fully realized. Their rebellion serves as a lasting witness to the nature of divine law, that all choices have consequences, and those consequences must be seen, understood, and acknowledged before justice is complete. Free will is the foundation of moral responsibility. Without it, there would be no true obedience, no real love, and no meaningful distinction between good and evil. God, in His wisdom, created beings with the ability to choose, for only through choice can virtue be real. If beings were programmed to do good without the possibility of choosing otherwise, their obedience would not be moral, but mechanical. Love that is forced is not love at all, and righteousness without the possibility of rebellion is not truly righteousness, but necessity. Satan and the fallen angels are proof of the weight of free will. They were created as powerful beings with knowledge and wisdom, yet they chose to rebel against divine authority. Their choice was not a mistake, nor was it an accident. It was an intentional rejection of God's order. Free will does not mean freedom from consequences, but it does mean that choices must be allowed to reach their natural end. If God had erased the fallen the moment they rebelled, then free will itself would have been compromised. Their continued existence upholds the reality that choices have consequences, and those consequences must be witnessed by all of creation. The presence of evil is not a failure of God's power, but a reflection of the gift of choice. If free will did not exist, then evil would never have emerged. But if free will were removed, then goodness itself would have no meaning. The reality of moral decision-making means that some will choose the wrong path, yet their choice must be respected in the sense that it is allowed to play out. To destroy Satan and his followers immediately would be to override the very system of moral agency that makes love and obedience meaningful. True authority is not demonstrated through suppression, but through the revelation of truth. If God's rule were enforced by eliminating all opposition immediately, then obedience would be based on fear rather than understanding. The rebellion of the fallen angels serves as an example of what happens when free will is misused. It is not enough to say that rebellion leads to destruction. Creation must see it unfold. The existence of the fallen is a living testimony to the fact that turning away from divine order leads not to liberation, but to decay and suffering. The structure of divine justice is built upon the principle that beings must be accountable for their own choices. If Satan had been removed instantly, then responsibility for his actions would have been blurred. Other beings might wonder whether he was truly guilty or if his claims against God had any merit. By allowing free will to fully manifest its consequences, God ensures that every intelligent being in creation sees for themselves why rebellion is not a path to freedom, but a path to ruin. Without free will, there is no moral progress. Beings learn not only by instruction, but by observation and experience. If God had immediately erased all who opposed him, the understanding of good and evil would remain incomplete. The role of free will is not just about allowing beings to make choices, it is about allowing those choices to be seen for what they are. The suffering caused by rebellion is not without purpose. It serves as an eternal lesson that will prevent future defiance against divine authority. The fallen angels' continued existence does not mean they have escaped judgment. Free will means that beings must be allowed to act according to their nature, but it does not mean they can act without consequence. Their time is limited, their power is restrained, and their final fate is already determined. They continue to exist, not because God cannot destroy them, but because their destruction must serve a greater understanding. When they are finally judged, it will be recognized as just, not as an arbitrary act of power. A world without free will would be a world without moral value. It is precisely because beings can choose that their actions have significance. If God removed every instance of rebellion the moment it occurred, then free will would be meaningless. The fallen angels exist as proof that choices matter, that rebellion leads to destruction, and that divine order is not a system of control, but a system of truth. They are not free from judgment, but their continued existence reinforces the very principle that makes goodness meaningful, the ability to choose it. For love, righteousness, and justice to exist, free will must be maintained. God does not create mindless servants, but beings capable of relationship, understanding, and devotion. This means allowing the possibility of rebellion, even when it leads to suffering. The fallen are not erased instantly, because to do so would undermine the very foundation of moral existence. Free will must remain intact, and its consequences must be revealed so that all of creation may understand why the way of God is the only true way. The existence of Satan and the fallen angels is not an oversight or a sign of divine weakness. It is part of a greater plan that is still unfolding. God operates within a timeline that is beyond human comprehension, ensuring that every action, every consequence, and every lesson is fully realized before judgment is executed. If God had destroyed the fallen angels immediately after their rebellion, the purpose of creation itself would remain incomplete. The story of existence is not one of mere power, but of wisdom, love, and revelation. God's plan is not just about eliminating evil, but about demonstrating truth. If judgment were immediate, the full weight of rebellion would not be understood. The fallen beings continue to exist because their presence allows the reality of their choices to be fully revealed. The consequences of their actions ripple through time, teaching all of creation the true nature of rebellion and separation from God. Their suffering, their deception, and their ultimate fate will serve as a permanent lesson, ensuring that no being will ever again question the justice of God's rule. The timeline of divine justice is not dictated by human impatience, but by the necessity of complete understanding. If God were to act according to immediate human expectations, then creation would not witness the full scope of his wisdom. The delay in judgment is not an oversight, it is an act of mercy. It allows the consequences of sin and rebellion to be fully displayed, so that when justice is finally executed, no doubt remains as to why it was necessary. God's ultimate plan involves the redemption of those who are willing to return to him and the final judgment of those who refuse. The fallen angels have made their choice, and their fate is sealed, but their presence still serves a purpose. They function as a contrast, highlighting the reality that apart from God, there is only ruin. The suffering they cause is not beyond divine control, but is permitted to demonstrate what existence looks like when beings reject divine order. Every act of evil, every deception, every destruction they bring forth only reinforces the truth that rebellion leads to nothing but suffering. The presence of the fallen is part of the grand narrative of good and evil, where ultimate justice is not rushed, but fulfilled at the right time. If Satan had been removed instantly, then the history of creation would be incomplete. The struggle between good and evil is not just about conflict, it is about revelation. Through this struggle, the truth of divine love, justice, and righteousness is made known in a way that is undeniable and eternal. The continued existence of the fallen is not an allowance of chaos, but a carefully measured part of a greater design that leads to ultimate restoration and judgment. Every action permitted by God serves his greater purpose. Satan and his angels do not act outside of divine oversight. They exist within the boundaries God allows. Though they seek to oppose him, their very existence ends up serving his plan. They think they are working against him, yet every evil act they commit only reinforces the reality of divine truth. Every lie they spread, every suffering they cause, every deception they weave, only leads more souls to recognize that apart from God there is no life, no peace, and no hope. The unfolding of God's ultimate plan ensures that every being in creation understands the necessity of divine justice. If evil had been eradicated the moment it appeared, then obedience would be based on fear rather than understanding. Instead, the full effects of rebellion are allowed to manifest so that no being will ever again doubt that God's way is the only true way. The fallen beings, in their defiance, serve as evidence that rejection of God does not lead to freedom but to destruction. Their existence is temporary, but their lesson is eternal. The delay in judgment is not an escape for the fallen, but a demonstration of divine patience. God does not act impulsively. He ensures that his justice is recognized as righteous. The fallen may continue to exist for now, but their fate is already determined. They are not victorious, nor are they outside of God's reach. Their rebellion, though allowed to persist, is ultimately self-defeating. They are not an indication of divine failure, but of divine wisdom, showing creation what happens when one chooses to oppose the source of all life. The unfolding plan of God is one of ultimate resolution. The fallen are not outside of divine control. They are part of a greater process that leads to the fulfillment of all things. When their time is up, their judgment will not be questioned. It will be understood as necessary and just. Their continued existence is not a flaw in the plan, but a necessary step in ensuring that every being sees, understands, and acknowledges that separation from God leads only to destruction. This is not a delay in justice, it is the completion of it.